citizens, our world today is actually, despite ISIL, despite the visible killings that you see and how horrific they are, we are actually living in a period of less daily threat to Americans and to people in the world than normally, less deaths, less violent deaths today than through the last century.
And we welcome you back into Hour 2 of America's Forum alongside Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth. We just heard from our Secretary of State, John Kerry, in front of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, claiming the U.S. is safer now than it was during the last century. But that comment is raising a lot of concerns, Miranda.
Yeah, to say the least. A lot of pundits are questioning Kerry's comments because Loretta Lynch has previously said that ISIS is an evolving threat to the U.S. So are we really as safe as Kerry claims?
And you've got the Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, earlier this week talking about possible attacks on shopping malls here in our nation.
Conflicting views there.
On again, off again. One guy who is always on target with his information joins us now for our intelligence briefing. That would be retired U.S. Army Major General Paul Vallely, Skyping in from Big Sky Country in Montana. Paul is also the chairman of the group Stand Up America. General, we're so happy to have you back here on America's Forum.
Back.
Paul, I just have to ask you straight up, do you agree with what John Kerry said in his congressional testimony yesterday?
Absolutely not. You know, he lives in a parallel universe with the rest of them there, and I think they approved the marijuana a little too early back there because they're all inhaling it because they're not in the same world that many of us who are in the national security business are. The American people are at greater risk than ever because of our borders, because of radical Islam and the threats, Iran, North Korea, Russia, China, cyber terrorism. So, I mean, it's absolutely perplexing that he would make a statement like that. Unbelievable.
Why do you think he would? Is that just to make us feel better and safer? I mean, people are not unaware of what's going on. These attacks have been going on in Paris and Canada, and these 3 men were just arrested, 2 in New York, 1 in Florida. I mean, why would you say that?
Miranda, I think the reason is probably, there's multiple reasons. Number one, yeah, they want to make sure that the American people know, according to the White House and State Department and other agencies there, that we're okay, that it's all right, don't worry, go about your business as usual, travel, etc. I think the second part is that's their agenda. That's what they're putting out and spewing to the American people and to our allies and friends that we used to have overseas. It's just incredible that we have such inept, corrupt people missing the point and what's happening with the threats to America.
Paul, about 2 minutes remain in this segment, so let's now move to the big news that came out earlier this morning. The whole notion of Jihad John, that's what we used to call this guy, responsible for brutal beheadings in the name of ISIS. Apparently now he's been identified. He's a British national, originally from Kuwait. And so now that we know him, Mohammed Emwazi, how soon do you think we're going to get our hands on this guy?
Well, there's only 2 ways to do it. They can do it through the Free Syrian Army by basically snatching them out of one of those villages is one way, a special ops team going in and taking them either from the Brits, the French, or the U.S. But certainly he's on the ground there. He's probably working out of Raqqa in Syria. So you'd have to do an on-ground operation to get him, JD. And, you know, he's from a wealthy family from West London. Through voice recognition and other technological ways, we're able to pinpoint exactly who these people are. So, but it's going to be tough. You have to do a ground operation to get them.
Well, I guess he wasn't in need of a job, right?
That's right.
Let's talk about North Korea.
Think so.
Yeah, let's talk about North Korea real quickly. According to reports coming out that the nuclear program there is growing just at a tremendous rate. They're saying by 2020 they could have 100 nukes. Should we be concerned?
Well, we should be. There's several reasons, and I've espoused this earlier on interviews. Iran works directly with North Korea. That's why I feel Iran already has a nuclear capability, because the North Koreans have tested the launch system, the Shahab missile system. They've checked and tested out their command and control, their guidance systems for these missiles. And third, the nuclear warhead. And every time North Korea has any kind of a test, there's always Iranians on the ground. So they're working very closely together. So you've got the dual threat there of Iran with nuclear capability and North Korea, who are avowed enemies of the United States.
And while the North Koreans works to add to their nuclear arsenal, what's going on here at home with our defense budget? We'll talk about that next with Paul Vallely.
Budget cuts and sequestration are undermining the department's ability to maintain a robust and ready force, to retain the best and brightest people, and to invest in the capabilities that are going to be necessary to keep our technological edge and our military superiority in a more challenging future.
That's Michele Flournoy, CEO for a group known as New American Security, speaking out about the continued decline in spending on our military programs. According to several reports, our military capabilities are much weaker than previously thought. With that in mind, let's continue our conversation now with retired U.S. Army Major General Paul Vallely, Skyping in from Big Sky country. The sky may be limitless out there in Montana, General, but the budget is not. We've had sequestration. Obviously, it's academic and problematic what happened with that in terms of cuts to the military. What do you perceive to be the greatest threat to our military preparedness right now?
Well, I think the White House is our biggest threat as they continue to gut not only the support of advanced weapon systems, they're cutting back and actually giving pink slips to a lot of our mid-level officers, captains and majors, even senior NCOs. The morale is about as bad or worse than it's ever been in our history. It's just incredible when you start purging the system of training abilities and having the funding available to continue to put together and to have a very effective strike force, joint strike force combination of Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and so on. And so what's happening as you weaken by intention, they are intentionally weakening our military so that we don't look strong in the world anymore. And there's no more peace through strength. And we've lost that. And J.D. and Miranda, the military knows this, and we're encouraging the senior military, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to start to stand up and say, no more. We've got too many threats against America. We've got to be stronger each and every day and have the best force again in the entire world to protect the American people. That's what they need to do.
Well, mindful of that, Paul, and obviously it would appear that the first rule, and certainly you've written about principles of leadership, the first thing a commander does is make sure his troops are well supplied and well trained. So is there a reticence? Has politics reared its head to such a point at the Pentagon that those uniformed leaders in our military are not offering a very unvarnished and clear assessment to our commander-in-chief?
Well, I think many of the officers and senior NCOs are trying to do their best with what's going on and the restraint and the restriction of budget items that preclude them from doing what they need to do, particularly in what we call training and readiness. That's what's being affected the most. And when you talk about readiness, the inability to project force across the world, you look at what's happening in Syria and Iraq and other places, that we are weakened so much now that some military officers says we cannot, as an armed force, effectively accomplish our missions anymore. And that is what is a travesty in this whole national security arrangement being directed from the White House. We hope Ash Carter, the new Secretary of Defense, will stand up. But once you get that fold and you're directed directly by Obama what to do and not to do, and you're restricted so much, we cannot be ready and we can't accomplish our mission to protect America.
Some other leftist leaders around the world have tried to reduce their standing military to little more than search and rescue operations. Do you think that's what our current commander-in-chief is trying to do?
Well, we know over the years, JD, particularly the NATO nations, have cut back their budget extremely, well, I'll say in extreme ways, and they haven't had the capability that the U.S. has had in these what I call Joint Strike Force operations. And we continue to give military aid, across the board to Pakistan, to Saudi Arabia. They pay for it, of course, but we restricted what Egypt was receiving when General al-Sisi took over. So from the standpoint across the world, we're not looked at as the credible armed forces that we used to have, and that's why you see different coalitions being set up now by King Abdullah, by General al-Sisi, United Arab Emirates, and even Saudi Arabia. They realize that we cannot be counted upon militarily to do what we have to do. And ISIS gains ground each and every day, capturing more Christians. So they're expanding, they're recruiting, and we seem to be getting weaker.
Major General Paul Vallely, we appreciate your assessment, even if it is a rather sobering picture of our military preparedness and what we really need to do to correct things. Sir, as always, thanks so much for Skyping in rather early from Montana this morning. We do appreciate your time.
Miranda, thank you.
Now, when we come back, my old congressional colleague Bob Walker will talk the influence game in Washington, specifically net neutrality and who is pushing for it. That's ahead here on America's Forum.